So, we got a new Star Wars movie coming out, but I've already reviewed the first 6 films last year in preparation for The Force Awakens, so what's there really left to do now? Oh yeah, I forgot that that was a movie that came out in theaters. Hmm. Star Wars The Clone Wars came out in 2008 and is the theatrical pilot to the animated show that would follow a few months later. The movie takes place in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So the movie opens with Jabba the Hutt's son being kidnapped by a mysterious force. Jabba goes to the Republic to try to enlist help, and in return he promises to let the Republic use the trade routes near his territory to move supplies across the Outer Rim. I'll elaborate on that element a little later as your mind consumes that stupidity. So the Republic sends Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is now a Jedi Master, and Anakin Skywalker, who is now a Jedi Knight, to find Jabba the Hutt's son and return him to Tatooine. And they're also accompanied by Anakin Skywalker's new apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. And soon they discover that there's a bigger threat to this plot that really is actually more complicated than it has to be. Now, I remember when this movie was coming out in the theaters, and when the trailers came out, a lot of people, including myself, didn't really know what to make of this, because it was a Star Wars movie that wasn't live action, it wasn't being released in May, and it was being distributed by Warner Brothers and not 20th Century Fox. So a lot of people didn't really know how to feel about this, including myself. I was skeptical by seeing the trailers. At the same time, though, I always need a good Star Wars fix every once in a while. So when this movie was getting ready to come out, like the week it was coming out, I was actually out of town on a 10-day backpacking trip with a bunch of friends from high school, so I had no connection to the internet at all, no way of actually finding out what the word of mouth on this movie was. So I didn't get back until the weekend after the movie had come out, and by the time I got back, the reviews were so bad for this thing, I told myself, I'm not going to waste my time seeing this movie. If it's really as bad as people are saying it is, and people were saying that it was worse than the prequels, then what's the point of going out of my way to see it? So I didn't see this movie until after the mid-season finale of season 1. And I don't think it's as bad as many people said it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a bad movie, but I don't think it's 18% on Rotten Tomatoes level bad. And I think some of that has to deal with the fact that I saw this on TV where it was meant to be seen. This was originally 3 episodes of the show that George Lucas at the last minute decided to knot together to release it as a theatrical film. And because I didn't see it in the theaters, maybe that's why I'm not as critical as everyone else was. I mean, the biggest issue with this movie is the animation. Now, on the show, the animation is very acceptable because it's a TV show on Cartoon Network, or in the case of Star Wars Rebels, Disney XD. But for a theatrical movie, this is embarrassing. There are some points where the animation just looks really bad. Some of it looks perfectly fine if you watch it on TV, but there are some bits of animation here that wouldn't even pass for TV. And especially when you consider that 2008 had many great animated movies like Kung Fu Panda and WALL-E, which looked visually outstanding, especially WALL-E. This one just kind of goes, the animation is ugly. Now, as for the character designs, I don't have a problem with the character designs. They're unique for the show. At first glance, it is weird considering that they took the designs of the Jenny Tartakovsky 2D animated series and just turned it to 3D and painted all the characters with dry acrylic paint. It's a little jarring at first, but after a while, you kind of get used to it. A lot of people said that a lot of the characters, because of the art style, look like toys, and I can kind of see that. I mean, this seemed more like a ploy to sell toys than the Ewoks were in Return of the Jedi. The best way I can describe the look of these characters is imagine that Geppetto started making Star Wars toys out of wood, and then the Blue Fairy just brought them all to life. That's what this reminds me of. It works fine on the show, but as a movie, it's inexcusable. And the characters are totally wooden. I mean, they look wooden, literally, but the expressions that each of the characters make are almost non-existent. Obi-Wan just seems to not really care about anything that's going on, nor does Anakin or any of the other characters. They just kind of have this bored, or blank expression throughout the whole movie. As the animated series would progress, the animation would get better, and the characters would actually show real expressions. But again, just for the sake of this movie, it makes the characters even more wooden than they were in the prequels. The plot doesn't really do much either. At its core, it's just too simple to carry a feature-length film, and it's too dumb to really pass as 3 episodes of the TV show. Because just think about this. The Republic agrees to find Jabba the Hutt's son, just so Jabba can allow them to use trade routes in outer space to deliver supplies throughout the Outer Rim. It's outer space! You don't need trade routes or freeways in outer space, just fly through space. It's Phantom Menace all over again, where the main drive of the movie is completely political, and it's boring. And then by the time we get to the third act of the movie, there is a third act twist that somehow makes this overly simple plot into an overly complicated one. I won't say what it is, but it's just one of those things that make you go, why are you introducing this now, and why should I even care? As for the characters, we've got the ones that we're familiar with already. We got Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, Jabba the Hutt, Count Dooku. But in terms of your new characters, we have Ahsoka Tano, who is introduced as Anakin Skywalker's apprentice, which I find ironic that the same year that this movie came out, The Force Unleashed was released, which focused around Darth Vader's secret apprentice. When I talk about her, I'm only judging her based on this movie alone, and in this movie alone, Ahsoka is just really annoying, bratty, and the chemistry between Anakin and Ahsoka, they just act like an old married couple that do nothing but bitch at each other, rather than master and apprentice. For Ahsoka, in this movie alone, she's not a good character at all. But as the animated series would progress, she would get better, especially by the time we get to Star Wars Rebels. This movie also introduces us to Captain Rex, who would be a fan favorite as the animated series would go on. But in this movie alone, there's not much to his character at all. He's just a generic clone commander who has really cool, badass armor that looks like the ARC Trooper armor from the Jenny Tartakovsky 2D micro series. But character-wise, he has jack shit to do here. Although, if you want another interesting bit of trivia, Captain Rex was originally the pilot for the original Star Tours ride, who was voiced by Paul Rubens, so I wonder if they decide to name this character off of that character from Star Tours. Just a little something else to think about. So those are the 2 standout characters that are introduced in this movie that would continue through the series. But I want to talk about the last character in this movie, who, if you thought Jar Jar Binks was offensive, you have seen nothing until you've seen Zero the Hutt. Zero the Hutt is introduced in the last act of the movie, and he's this giant, flamboyant drag queen space slug who is supposed to be the uncle of Jabba the Hutt. And when you watch this movie, when you take into account the voice and just the overall look that he has, you sit there and go, oh my god, that is the most offensive Star Wars character ever. You look at Jar Jar Binks and Watto and go, you two are offensive, but you will never be Zero the Hutt offensive. Because he's just pretty much a drag queen stereotype, and you just ask yourself, why? Why does this thing exist? Why was this movie released in theaters? I have no idea at all. But if I were to think of some sort of reason why this was released in theaters, it would probably be because they got Christopher Lee and Samuel L. Jackson to come back as Count Dooku and Mace Windu, respectively. When it comes to Christopher Lee, Count Dooku is in this movie long enough to where you can justify Christopher Lee's casting. You watch it and go, okay, Count Dooku is a menace enough, and he's in the movie long enough to warrant Christopher Lee coming back. But Samuel L. Jackson has no reason to be in this movie. He only appears in the first act. He only has 8 lines of dialogue and doesn't partake in any action at all. He just stands around talking, and that's it. And I counted. He has 8 lines exactly. So outside of why he's in this, it also makes you wonder how much money was he paid just to say 8 lines in an animated movie that nobody really bothered to see. So, talking about this movie has really made me more angry and aggressive at it. But I'm not going to turn to the dark side. I will be fair and honest. This movie has no reason to exist. Even if you took this and put it on TV the way it was intended to be, this is one of the lesser episodes of the animated series. It's boring, the animation is subpar, the characters are annoying, the plot's ridiculous, and while the battle scenes are kind of cool, they go for way too long, and because there's no emotional stakes to it, they mean nothing. So this is actually a tough movie to rate, but I'm going to give it 2 ratings. My first rating will be judging it as simply a movie. Don't waste your money on this. This movie really has no reason to exist. I honestly keep forgetting that this movie was released in theaters and that Rogue One is officially not the first theatrical Star Wars spin-off. So just don't bother with this movie at all. But if I were to judge it within the entire Star Wars Clone Wars animated series, I would say watch at your own risk. Maybe watch the first 25 minutes of it. Like skip the prologue, just watch the first 25 minutes during the Battle of Christophsis. That's the only important thing you really need to know, because that introduces Ahsoka Tano. You don't have any other reason to watch the rest of the movie. But if you're watching the entire animated series, I would recommend watching the first 25 minutes just so you can get an introduction to Ahsoka. And that's my review for Star Wars The Clone Wars. Hopefully Rogue One will be a lot better, and from what I'm hearing, it is. But I'll reserve judgment until I actually see Rogue One. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on Star Wars The Clone Wars. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.